President, we have a national emergency.
This is one of the things that we can shoot first and ask questions later. Normally you can't do that.
All of a sudden these trees started moving out of the way. They parted for me. And then I came out into this opening, and there where I saw Jesus Christ.
Back in 1927, an American socialist, Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program. He is more imminent.
James Madison, in 1788, speaking to the Virginia Convention, said, "Since the general civilization of mankind, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachment of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations."
When men were free.
Broadcasting live from a secret location buried deep below the earth, you're about to make a connection to the signs of the times. W. Dean Shook is live on the air right now.
You have just tuned in to End Time News, and I'm W. Dean Shook, proud and privileged to be able to bring you the news the mainstream media is never going to touch. Let me say welcome to all our listeners on the iHeartRadio network, our regular broadcast affiliates, our internet connections at Blog Talk Radio Network and the Spreaker Radio Network. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it very, very much. And I've got some news for you today that's going to be very interesting. But I'd like to start with an announcement. And that is, some of you may have heard that there's rumors going around the internet that Vladimir Putin is dead. Well, Debkafile is reporting that the Kremlin press office Friday told media heads not to leave Moscow in the next few days and to stand by for an important announcement by Vladimir Putin. The CEO of the Center for Political Information, Alexei Mukin, did not deny the president is currently incapacitated. Thursday, Russian internet sites carried rumors of Putin's death after he had not been seen in public since March 5th. The rumors were not confirmed. Merkin's replied to the question about his death. He said, "No comment." And we'll start your regular news in just a moment. I'll be right back.
To me, without question, the most prominent, the most profound biblical prophecies that are unfolding that speak to the fact that we are very close to the return of the Lord. Number one is the return of Israel to the land. I can't stress that enough. That's a 2,500-year-old prophecy that has come to pass in our historical lifetime, the only generation to ever see that. And then, on top of that, we have several prophecies in several different places in the Old Testament speaking of once Israel is back in the land. And by the way, there were so many theologians who, when they came across those prophecies of Israel returning in the last days, they couldn't imagine that that would happen before the return of the Lord. That was such a supernatural thing. How can a people that have been gone for thousands of years and scattered to the ends of the earth, how could they return to their homeland? The world wouldn't allow it. That's what they thought. And so they said that can't happen until the Lord returns and the Lord brings his people back. But yet we see that that prophecy was meant literally, and that it has literally happened. And we have seen it happen, and we're the only generation to see it happen. And now the Bible continues to speak of once that returned Israel comes back to the land, then there will be an alignment of nations that will come against the nation of Israel to destroy it. And we're watching that unfold before us. Now with Arab Spring, the fall of Egypt, the fall of Libya, the continual civil wars and governmental strifes taking place there, the rise of ISIS, the rise of the Islamic world, the rise of the turbulence and the turmoil and terrorism in the Middle East that's spreading out its branches to Europe and even in America and other places of the world. We're watching this unfold before us, and many Bible experts and prophecy students believe that these things are happening in accordance with prophecies from God's Word. And we're watching them unfold before our eyes.
And I played that clip because I have a related story. This is a WND exclusive. End-time prophecy watchers are marveling over new reports out of Jerusalem this week that the altar of the Lord has been reconstructed by the Temple Institute. The institute, based in the old city of Jerusalem, announced it's finished building an altar that's essentially ready for use in sacrificial services. The altar is the most ambiguous project to date toward the goal of rebuilding the Jewish temple. This massive outdoor altar, which took several years to build, can be operational in little more than a moment's notice. This altar is the last major component needed for the long-obstructed sacrifices to resume in the future Jewish temple. Ultra-Orthodox Jews pray daily for its reconstruction on top of the holy mound known as Mount Moriah, or the Temple Mound. Bible scholars say the rebuilding of the ancient temple is predicted throughout Scripture, starting with Daniel's vision in Daniel 9:29, and Jesus echoed Daniel's warning about the abomination standing in the holy place in the last days in Matthew 24:15, followed by the Apostle John's vision in the temple in Revelation 11:1 and 2, and Paul also mentioned it in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 3, and 4. Most people don't realize the temple had two altars, the altar of burnt offerings and the altar of incense. The largest was the altar of burnt offerings. Designing and built it to exact biblical specifications required quite an undertaking. Jonathan Cahn, author of The Harbinger and The Mystery of the Shemitah, also sees the announcement as very significant. He said, "We know that end-time prophecy cannot be fulfilled without the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem." Cahn, who's a Messianic Jew and rabbi in New Jersey, said the abomination of desolation prophesied in Daniel and in the Gospels must take place within the temple precincts. So too the Apostle Paul spoke of the man of sin, or the Antichrist, sitting in the temple of God. What many people don't realize is that along with the Holy of Holies, the altar of the temple is the most central and critical part of the temple. Cahn said, "It's the altar that's in the center of the abomination causing desolation." It was specifically the altar of the temple that was desecrated by Antiochus that compromised the first abomination desolation and the foreshadowing of what will take place in the end times, he said. So any progress made toward the rebuilding of the altar is worthy of our attention. And you can find that full story posted on the website at wdeanshook.com right after the program. And here's one that I bet you haven't heard yet. According to the Times of Israel out of Caracas, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez has said that the U.S. is laying a legal groundwork to wage war against the South American country. The administration of U.S. President Barack Obama is seeking congressional approval to attack any country that doesn't serve its interests, Rodriguez said. At a hearing in the U.S. Senate on Wednesday, the White House asked lawmakers to grant extensive power to fight the Islamic State anywhere in the world, which, according to Rodriguez, leaves the door open to a military campaign in Venezuela. He said Thursday the U.S. is preparing to declare war on all countries because requesting authorization to use military force without a geographic restrictions mean they can invade any country, the minister said. He also called on Venezuelans to prepare for a U.S. embargo against Venezuela's trade, finance, and economy, similar to the one Washington imposed on Cuba more than 50 years ago. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has called on the country to unite to prepare for U.S. aggression and asked Parliament to give him the right to rule by decree for 6 months so his government can quickly react to any threats. In a nationwide televised address on Monday, Maduro said that the U.S. president had taken the most aggressive step against his country. And just a couple days later, out of the Washington Times, it's reporting the Obama administration has imposed sanctions against 7 high-ranking Venezuelan officials Monday, and it accused Mr. Maduro of human rights abuses. It demanded the release of all political prisoners, including opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez, who was detained since February of 2014, and Caracas Mayor Antonio Ledesma, who the government accuses of plotting a coup. Latin American leaders have rallied around embattled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as relations between Washington and Caracas have plunged to a new low. Governments from Havana to Buenos Aires have denounced Mr. Obama's executive order labeling Venezuelan as a national security threat as unwelcomed U.S. meddling in regional affairs. Mr. Maduro, a former bus driver and union leader who succeeded the populist Chavez in 2013, fired back that the U.S. imperialist elite was trying to topple his government. Venezuela's allies across the Western Hemisphere has supported that view. Ecuador called the U.S. order an unacceptable attack on Venezuela's sovereignty, and Cuba, in the midst of the efforts to mend ties with the United States, assured Caracas of its unconditional support. In recent months, Venezuela has been marked by violent repression and protests, price inflation nearly 70%, plunging oil revenue with falling global prices, and long lines at grocery stores have led to severe shortages of basic household goods. They went on to say the attitude of the United States is absolutely exaggerated and surprising. Mr. Godoy said in an interview, acknowledging that he was troubled by some incidents in Venezuela. The senator insisted that there were internal matters and that the rule of law was intact. And this story goes much deeper, will also be posted on the website. And here's a story about our privacy that I think everybody needs to be aware of. There was a mysterious spy cameras collecting data at a post office in Denver. This, according to Fox 31, within an hour of Fox 31 discovering a hidden camera which was positioned to capture and record the license plate and facial features of customers leaving a golden post office. The device was ripped from the ground and disappeared. Here's a clip of this story.
A spy camera controversy at the post office. We found hidden cameras in use at offices around Denver, gathering information without your knowledge. Thanks for staying with us at 9:30. I'm Deborah Takahara.
And I'm Boris Sanchez. Tonight, only on Fox 31 Denver, investigative reporter Chris Halsney reveals how spy programs are now tracking who you're communicating with via snail mail.
The next time you drop off packages at the U.S. Post Office, keep an eye out for hidden cameras as you leave. Here in Golden, we caught the U.S. Postal Inspection Service capturing everybody's license plates, then pairing that information with a picture of the person's face.
This camera lens and recording device wasn't easy to spot. Managers at the Golden Post Office branch on Johnson Road didn't even know it was on their property until Fox 31 Denver pointed it out. Witnesses say from around Thanksgiving through the busy holiday season and into January, it snapped pictures, thousands of them, of everyone driving a vehicle out the single-lane exit. Customers were not informed in any way.
I'm not sure that I can do anything about it, whether I agree with it or not, frankly. It's just part of the data that's being collected, and where it goes, hard to tell.
I don't think that it's America that we should be safe doing what we do and not being watched every minute of every day.
Within an hour of Fox 31 Denver asking the law enforcement branch of the U.S. Postal Service why the camera was snapping away month after month, the surveillance device was ripped from the ground and disappeared. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service sent us a statement after refusing an on-camera explanation. It says cameras are deployed for security of our facilities, safety of our customers and employees, or for criminal investigations. Employees of the Postal Inspection Service are sworn to uphold the Constitution, including protecting the privacy of the American public. Our discovery of this camera program comes just months after the post office was forced to reveal during congressional hearings that it was videotaping and storing the address and return information from billions of pieces of mail. A federal audit in 2014 found that the post office had insufficient controls in place when allowing law enforcement agencies access to the data collected from that mail cover program.
Part of being a responsible constitutional government is explaining why it's surveilling its citizens.
Lee Tien is an attorney for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He says citizens may be getting used to security cameras watching them, but the government tracking movements, then recording and keeping those for future law enforcement snooping is something EFF thinks should come with strict rules.
The government generally shouldn't be collecting this kind of sensitive information, and it is sensitive because it's about your relationships, and the idea that we give up the privacy in that simply because we use the U.S. mails is, I think, a silly idea.
Fox 31 Denver scoured county, state, and federal courts for search warrants authorizing the collection of license plates and pictures of customers' faces, but we couldn't find any criminal case to explain it. Our requests for a written policy on retention time periods of images of innocent customers captured here so far have been ignored.
Well, since I don't have anything to hide, I don't really care, but I don't like the idea of it.
The ongoing mystery bothered most Golden Post Office customers we spoke with, but not all of them.
If it was a little more personal, like reading into my text messages and stuff like that for no real reason, then that's something I'd be a little more alarmed about, but just general surveillance like that for everyone, kind of, no.
We did find a California company who claims it sold the U.S. Postal Service consumer surveillance systems, complete with wireless data retrieval and infrared night capabilities. The company would not return our calls. And so far, our numerous federal Freedom of Information Act requests to get contract and financial information about that reported deal and other camera deals have turned up nothing.
All right, Chris, great story there. The big question, though, there are security cameras everywhere, as you mentioned in the story. But there's a distinction here between what the federal government is doing with these cameras and security cameras, let's say at 7-Eleven, for example. What's the difference?
Well, the attorneys out there who are dealing with issues of freedom say that just being on camera is one thing, but when the government starts collecting that over a long period of time with no rules about how long they can keep it, who they can share it with, and how they can use it without a judge overseeing it, can create problems down the road for privacy.
Sure. All right, Chris Halsey, thanks so much.
And what is really disturbing here is the camera program comes just months after the U.S. Postal Service was forced to reveal during a congressional hearing that it was videotaping and storing the addresses and return information for billions of pieces of mail at its distribution center. And according to Breitbart News, top Democrats went berserk over Tom Cotton's open letter to the Iranian regime, warning them that President Obama's executive agreement with them was not the final word. Obama said at the Gridiron dinner, "You don't diminish your office by taking a selfie. You do it by sending a poorly written letter to Iran. Really, that wasn't a joke." Secretary of State John Kerry said that Cotton's letter was unconstitutional and that they cannot change an executive agreement. He continued by saying that the letter was unprecedented. Unprecedented. It's false information and directly calculated to interfere and basically saying, don't negotiate with them. You've got to negotiate with 535 members of Congress. Well, of course, it's not unprecedented for Congress to involve itself in foreign policy in precisely the way that Cotton and 46 other senators did. And Barack Obama reportedly contacted Iran through back channels before his election to encourage him not to make a deal with George W. Bush. He'd be much more helpful to the mullahs after his inevitable election. But never mind the facts. Republicans are traitors for having the temerity to teach the Iranian government about the Constitution because, as Professor John Yoo points out, Cotton and company are exactly right about the facts that executive agreements are not the final word in foreign policy. The Cotton letter is right because if President Obama strikes a nuclear deal with Iran by not attacking Iran or by lifting sanctions under power delegated by Congress, not only could the next president terminate the agreement, Obama himself could terminate the deal. Under the Constitution's Foreign Commerce Clause, only Congress has the authority to impose international economic sanctions. Obama's executive agreement cannot prevent Congress from imposing mandatory, severe sanctions on Iran without the possibility of presidential waiver. According to Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, the agreement will not be a bilateral agreement between Iran and the U.S., but rather one that will be concluded with the participation of 5 other countries, including all parliament members of Security Council, who will be endorsed by a Security Council resolution. The goal would seem to be that after Obama signs his executive agreement, which will be endorsed by the so-called P5+1, Obama will then go to the United Nations to completely dismantle the Iranian sanctions regimen. This was a regimen that took years to put together and more years to implement and enforce. By doing so, Obama will effectively destroy the sanctions regime, preventing congressional sanctions from having any kind of impact. As Andy McCarthy writes at National Review, it's outworldly to find an American administration conspiring against the Constitution and the Congress in cahoots with a terror-sponsored enemy with which we don't even have formal relations. They're doing it in order to pave the way for Iran to have nuclear weapons. Yet, that's what's happening. Today, the Times of Israel reported that Obama's National Intelligence Director delivered a report to the U.S. Senate removing Iran and Hezbollah from its list of terrorism threats, presumably as an olive branch to Iran. And in another story out of the UK, Christian News is reporting from Taunton, UK, a street preacher in the UK who's charged with making homophobic and Islamophobic remarks just completed a 2-day trial and awaits a verdict on whether or not biblical speech about the issues is considered a crime in the country. Mike Overd, a street preacher for 5 years, is accused of speaking against homosexuality and Islam last June and July on 2 separate occasions. He's now facing 2 charges of using threatening and abusive words and a charge of causing racially and religiously aggravated harassment, alarm, or distress under the Public Order Act. A police officer had appeared on local television last fall to urge residents to record Overd's speech, as it had been reported that he was causing an offense. He said, "I'd advise that if they're offended to record any incident in their mobile phone and send it to us." This according to Sergeant Mike Kimmons. In a video, a police officer approached the street preacher and tells him that he has received complaints of making homophobic statements. He went on to say, "If I hear one homophobic word out of your mouth here today, I will arrest you." Well, according to the Somerset Gazette, the officer then advised Overt that he has freedom of speech, but may not offend others. Overt's case is being heard by a Muslim, Judge Shamin Qureshi, who also serves as a presiding judge in the Sharia law-based Muslim Arbitration Tribunal. During this week's trial, Qureshi reportedly asked the street preacher questions about the death penalty in the Old Testament, as well as whether or not he would take issue with the religious preaching about other faiths in public. When free speech is not free speech at all. And I have another disturbing story out of Life News where a woman sends a 28-year-old aborted baby to her ex-boyfriend in a box. A woman who had just aborted a 28-week-old baby in Thailand delivered the dead child to her ex-boyfriend in a box and wrapped in a white towel. The horrific story was reported by the Bangkok Post, who called the 3rd-semester aborted child a fetus. Police are looking for the 21-year-old woman who allegedly had an abortion and delivered the dead baby to her ex-boyfriend at his house. The woman, identified as Wau, went outside the house, handed the box to her boyfriend's sister, and asked her to pass it on to her brother, and then quickly left in a taxi. Wau told police that when she told her boyfriend she was pregnant, he kept asking her to keep the baby. A letter allegedly accompanying the box containing the aborted baby outlined her hurtful feelings. In the letter, the woman said the boyfriend was cruel and cold-hearted in leaving her for a new girlfriend when she was pregnant. She wrote that she was left to go through the pregnancy alone, and that she hoped the dead baby would serve as a reminder of her boyfriend's irresponsibility. So now we're aborting babies for revenge? According to Breitbart News, top U.S. General John Kelly, commander of the U.S. Southern Command, warned lawmakers that Sunni extremists are radicalizing converts and other Muslims in Latin America, adding that the Islamic State may exploit traffickers in the region to infiltrate the United States. Here's what General John Kelly said.
Statement, you said, quote, in addition to thousands of Central Americans fleeing poverty and violence, foreign nationals from countries like Somalia, Bangladesh, Lebanon, and Pakistan are using the region's human smuggling networks to enter the United States. While many are merely seeking economic opportunity or fleeing war, a small subset could potentially be seeking to do us harm. Last year, ISIS adherents posted discussions on social media calling for the infiltration of the U.S. southern border. Can you tell us how serious you think that threat is?
I think, Senator, that the kind of people that you're referring to, of course, their intent is to do us the greatest amount of harm possible. This network that Bill and I deal with every day, not to mention the law enforcement folks, is so efficient that if a terrorist or almost anyone wants to get into our country, they just pay the fare. No one checks their passports. No one, they don't go through metal detectors. No one cares why they're coming. They just ride this network. And if someone wanted to come in here with nuclear material, I was just down at Emory University at the Ebola facility there, talking about how Ebola spreads and potentially could be used as a weapon. It's a scary proposition when I think of this network.
So how serious, in your view, is it that over time there may be an effort by terrorists to cross our southern border?
Extremely serious.
I thank you, General Kelly, and I thank you for your honorable service, and thank you, Admiral.
Now, according to General Kelly, who said Sunni extremists, while small in number, are actively involved in the radicalization of converts and other Muslims in the region, and also provide financial and logistical support to designated terrorist organizations within and outside of Latin America. The Southcom chief told lawmakers that Iran is seeking to counter U.S. influence in the Western Hemisphere. Said over the last 15 years, Iran has periodically sought closer ties with regional governments. Albeit mixed results, Iranian legislators visited Cuba, Ecuador, Nicaragua to advocate for increased economic and diplomatic cooperation, he said. Iran's outreach is predicated on circumventing sanctions and countering U.S. influence. He said additionally, Iran has established more than 80 cultural centers in a region with extremely small Muslim populations. The purported proposal of these centers is to improve Iran's image, promote Shia Islam, and increase Iran's political influence in the region, he said. He also added that as the foremost state sponsor of terrorism, Iran's movement in the region and these cultural centers is a matter of concern, and its diplomatic, economic, and political engagement is being closely monitored. Among other issues, General Kelly briefed reporters on the Pentagon about the threat of ISIS entering the U.S. through the southern border. And Republican from North Carolina, another one by Breitbart, Republican Robert Penninger, the chairman of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and Unconventional Warfare, released a manual to help Americans prepare for terrorist attacks and cyber crimes. Is this more preparation? He said there are U.S. cells today of terrorists that we're all aware of. He said, I chair the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism, so I'm conscious of the concerns. And I think we would be wise as a country to prepare ourselves better for what could happen. When asked by Breitbart News to explain his motive for releasing a terrorism preparedness manual, he noted that Americans are the targets of a number of terrorist groups, including the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Said there are folks in ISIS being trained by ISIS overseas right now who have American passports and European passports, and they have easy access to the U.S. Representative Penninger assembled the preparedness manual with the help of retired military officers, nationally recognized experts on counterterrorism and cybersecurity, FEMA, the American Red Cross, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Titled Preparing Your Home, Family, and Business for Terrorist Attacks, this 24-page manual can be downloaded for free at preparenow.com. That's www.preparenow.com. In January, Dianne Feinstein, the ranking member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, warned that there are terrorist sleeper cells in the U.S. She said, I think it's important we're all conscious of the threats against our homeland and the attacks that have already occurred on our homeland. The congressman told Breitbart News the purpose of the manual is to give families and small businesses the how-tos of what they can do to prepare in the event of a chemical, biological, nuclear, cyber, or other kinds of kinetic attacks. He went on to say, you don't want to all be involved in scaring people, but I think it would be very prudent and unwise to think, well, it's not going to happen here, he added. That would not be a reasonable approach. Clear minds would say, yes, it could happen here. So what is America doing to counter terrorism? Well, according to the Times of Israel, the Kurds are calling for coalition airstrikes on ISIS, and Obama pushes to allocate an additional $70 million to these quote-unquote rebel groups. Meanwhile, a spokesman for Syria's main Kurdish force called on the U.S.-led coalition on Friday to attack Islamic group positions in northeastern Syria where the jihadists are on the offensive. So why are we aiding terrorists? I don't know. I do know, but take it for what it says. Now, I'm going to take a short break here. When I come back, we're going to talk about a new Hamas operative who's been dubbed a civil rights leader, and how the GOP has double-crossed every one of us to make sure that the next president is a Democrat. And Michelle Obama celebrates an Iranian holiday in the White House. We've also got some pandemic news, and I've got a story about a man who's been jailed for 900 days without being charged for a crime. Right after these short messages, you're listening to End Time News.
End Time Prophecy News is the only program on the air that runs on recycled chickweed ethanol, working to save the planet every day.
Hi, folks. Have you noticed the federal government and police departments are using drones for everything? Drones are expensive. They're hard to fly. It can take up to a week just to learn to make a drone hover. Not anymore. There's a new generation of drones that are not only affordable, but very easy to fly. Now, you can have your own personal drone, anything from a micro mini that'll fit in the palm of your hand, right up to a full-scale model, 10 inches in diameter like the model I have, the V949 Pro. Comes with a 6-axis, 4-rotor blade and an HD 2.4 camera mounted on the bottom. These drones are made of a space-age polymer. They're durable. And don't worry about crashing your drone. Replacement blades for this drone from the website are only $1.80 for a pack of 4. That's right, I said $1.80 for a pack of 4 replacement blades. You can also get an extra long life battery. This battery allows you up to a half hour of fly time with a maximum speed of 40 miles an hour. Have your own personal drone, and you can get all of this for under $70 if you go to the website, wdeanshook.com, and click on the banner on the webpage. You can get from 7 to 22% off your personal drone. It's shipped as a kit. You can be up and flying your own personal drone with an HD camera within a half hour. Come to the webpage, wdeanshook.com. Click on that banner and get your discount today. wdeanshook.com.
This liberal will be all about socializing, would be about basically taking over and the government running all of your companies.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
I took the initiative creating the internet. I've now been in 57 states. I think one left to go.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society. In this election, Obama or McCain? Obama. Now, why not McCain? What don't you like about him?
He sort of doesn't sound like he has enough, like he's uneducated, because when he had both of the presidents speaking, he didn't sound like he knew what he was talking about too much, whereas Obama had facts and information when he was speaking.
Good point. Let me ask you this. Do you support Obama more because he's pro-life or because he says our troops should stay in Iraq and finish the war?
I guess both.
Now, if Obama wins, do you have any problem with Sarah Palin being his vice president?
No.
No? You
Not
think
at
she'll
all.
do a good job?
I think she'll do a good job.
Are you glad he elected her to be the VP if he wins?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Now, here are the aims for the United States. 1. Greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American...
GoDaddy offers everything you need to make a name for yourself on the web, from domain names and website builders to complete e-commerce solutions. We've earned our place as the world's #1 accredited domain registrar by delivering world-class products at competitive prices and support them with industry-best services delivered 24/7, 365. We're proud to serve our customers from locations around the world. Sign up now at wdeanshook.com and get your domain name as low as $5.99 a year. Sign up now at wdeanshook.com. Go, Daddy. Go, Daddy.
There is a sense in the world. There's a sense among believers. There's a sense among unbelievers. There's a sense among all peoples that things are unhinged. The Middle East is unhinged with uprisings, revolutions, and where's this heading? How are followers of Jesus to relate to all of these things? How do they relate to biblical prophecy? America is in spiritual, moral crisis. Values are changing, and so rapidly, that have not happened in the history of man. How are level-headed, responsible Christians to relate to the testimony of the biblical prophets and the unfolding of chaos throughout the world? Not just believers are wondering, is this a sign of the end?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. We either stand up to supporters of terrorism, or we and our allies risk losing the freedom we cherish. We must not let the jihadist government of Iran get a nuclear bomb. President Obama has had opportunity to stop them, but he's failing. Join with us and let's secure America now.
The report tonight from ABC Network News says the FBI is investigating a smuggling ring out of Chaparral, New Mexico. The shocker here is the origin of the people reportedly sneaking in.
ABC 7 reporter Ken Molestina is live with a story. Ken.
According to the ABC News report, the alleged smugglers out of Chaparral were bringing in illegal immigrants to train stations like these, but these illegal immigrants that they were bringing in apparently were from they were Iraqi and other Middle Eastern immigrants, and they were, of course, bringing them in illegally to the U.S. Now, according to the ABC report, it says that another report issued by the FBI last week shows the organization used to smuggle Mexicans, but now they've decided to smuggle Iraqi or other Middle Eastern individuals because it was more lucrative. According to the ABC report by Brian Ross, the alleged smugglers charged anywhere between $20,000 to $25,000 per person. Now, also detailed in the report is the way that the Middle Eastern immigrants were smuggled in. Once across the Rio Grande, unidentified individuals would bring the migrants to train stations here in El Paso and in Belen, New Mexico. These smugglings, according to the ABC investigators, have been going on for more than a year. Now, we did have an opportunity to contact an FBI spokeswoman. She says neither the El Paso offices or the Albuquerque offices, which oversee this area, have any specifics on the details of any type of a smuggling ring like like the one that we're talking about. However, if you would like to check out the entire report by Brian Ross, the ABC Network News report, you can log on to our website, kbia.com. Go ahead and click on the link, and it should take you right to it. Back to you.
All right, Ken, thank you.
And before we go on, let me remind everyone, you can download the End Time News app for your iPhone or your Android. Available free at Google Play and at the App Store. Download today and never miss another episode of End Time News. And as promised, LA Time fetes a Hamas operative as a civil rights leader. Now, I'm not kidding about this. In a feature spotlighting a new generation of civil rights leaders, LA Times profiled the executive director and the co-founder of an organization named by the Justice Department as an unindicted co-conspirator in a plot to finance the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. But the Times makes no mention of this in its entry for Nahad Awad of the Council of American Islamic Relations on the fact or the facts that he was, according to FBI evidence, a senior Hamas leader who helped form his organization in 1993 as a front for Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood in the U.S. The LA Times article, citing an interview with Intercept, Awad has been an outspoken spokesman of blanket surveillance of Muslims, and his own email account was allegedly tracked by the National Security Agency and the Federal Bureau of Investigation between 2006 and 2008, according to the documents leaked by Edward Snowden. He said, "I'm outraged as an American citizen that my government, after decades of civil rights struggles, still spies on political activists and civil rights activists and leaders." Awad told The Intercept, the news organization that broke the story, "I'm really angry that despite all of the work that we've done in our communities to serve the nation, we're treated with suspicion." Well, CARE was formed in 1994 by the U.S. branch of Hamas known as the Palestinian Committee. The function as the political arm of the Palestinian terrorist group. A year before founding the front group, Ahmad and Awad had attended a secret meeting with senior leaders of Hamas at a Palestinian hotel that was bugged by the FBI. An internal FBI memo written by the former head of the FBI Counterterrorism Division describes all attendees of the meeting, including Awad, as Hamas members. CARE, according to the evidence, was born out of a need to give a media twinkle to the Muslim Brotherhood leaders. They have an agenda of supporting violent jihad abroad while slowly institutionalizing Islamic law in the U.S. And the GOP leaders that were just elected into the office have once again stabbed us in the back. According to Washington, the next president likely will be a Democrat, and he or she may thank GOP leaders for that, according to Michelle Bachmann. She's the former congresswoman, told WND that will be the result of top Republicans allowing the funding of Obama's amnesty for 5 million illegal immigrants to pass. She said the bill ensures a Democrat likely will be elected president in 2016, with the Congress willing to double-cross the taxpayers by paying for 5 million illegal work permits, driver's licenses, Social Security numbers, Medicare, Medicaid, and ultimately fraudulently directing efforts to get illegals to vote in 2016. She said GOP leaders betrayed our trust with a real bait and switch because no one was running in favor of amnesty in November, and then we get this. Bachmann laminated, "We've come to expect to be disappointed by Democrats, but it was especially disappointing to see our own party flip-flop," as she described disastrous results. She went on to say that this was the most consequential vote for Democrats to ensure their political party dominance in the future. She said Democrats fully realized the vital importance of self-interest in voting for the bill because they saw 5 million potential new voters for the all-important 2016 election. But didn't Democrats assure Americans that illegal immigrants would not be able to vote? With Social Security numbers, a work permit, driver's license, they know no one doing voter registration would ever ask for legalization papers because in light of Ferguson, the request would be construed as racist. All you need to register to vote is a driver's license and a Social Security number. They will vote. And in the meantime, Michelle Obama celebrates an Iranian holiday at the White House, as I suppose she should. So why did God invent new media? Because when the First Lady of the United States appeases a lunatic Islamic regime like Iran, the mainstream media is going to cover that fact. The fact here is that Wednesday at the White House, the First Lady celebrated Nowruz, which White House dossier describes as the Iranian festival of spring that marks the beginning of the new Persian year. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with honoring the many events celebrated within the magnificent E Pluribus Unum melting pot of ours. The problem is that this is not about honoring a group of people who make up less than 1% of our population. When the Obama White House celebrates the Amish holiday of Old Christmas, be sure to fire up a flare, because you know that's not going to happen. The spectacle wasn't about anything other than kissing up to the women-oppressing, homosexual-murdering Islamic theocrats in Iran who have only 3 goals: get a nuclear bomb, use weapons to wipe out Israel, and jump into a pile of 72 virgins. Well, Obama's trying to salvage his failed presidency by cutting whatever deal he can with Iran. For that reason, we get to watch the First Lady pretend that she cares anything about this. And the Iranians most certainly know it was all for show, but that's what they appreciate, the fact that the Obama administration is desperate enough to put on this show. The White House dossier reads like this. When Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program after Bush invaded Iraq, it wasn't because Laura Bush celebrated a Libyan holiday. Said our attempts to placate evildoers with something like Nowruz invite only contempt. It confirms from them that we're weak and that they can take advantage of us. We are, as these things go, a nice people. Some of us, mostly on the left, tend to think that the rest of the world is nice too. Well, you know what? It's not. It's actually no more than self-indulgence to assume that others like us have any sense of common decency. The Iranians seem to understand our leaders much better than our leaders understand themselves. They know Obama will never attack them, and they're negotiating accordingly. Oh, by the way, Iranian executions are at a 12-year high. And somehow we seem to have come up with another pestilence. Boy, this list is non-stop. Mutating H7N9 bird flu may pose a pandemic threat, scientists warn Reuters. They say a wave of H7N9 bird flu in China that spread into people may have the potential to emerge as a pandemic strain in humans. This, according to scientists who made this announcement on Wednesday. The H7N9 virus, one of the several strains of bird flu known to be able to infect humans, has persisted. It's diversified and spread in chickens across China. Researchers said fueling a resurgence of infections in people and posing a wider threat. The expansion of genetic diversity and geographical spread indicates that unless effective control measures are in place, H7N9 could be expected to persist and spread throughout the region, they said in a study. They went on to say the H7N9 bird flu virus emerges in human in March 2013. It has since then affected at least 571 people in China, Taipei, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Canada, killing 212 of them. According to the February data from the World Health Organization, after initial flare-up of human cases at the start of 2013, the H7N9 appeared to die down, aided in a large part by Chinese authorities deciding to close live poultry markets and issue health warnings about direct contact with chickens. But infections in people are increasing again last year and early 2015, prompting researchers to try to understand more about how the virus reemerged, how it might develop, and how it might threaten public health. In the study, an international team of scientists led by Guy Guan of Hong Kong University monitored the evolution and spread of H7N9 over 15 cities across 5 provinces in China. Flu experts not directly involved in the research said its findings were interesting, but did not necessarily show the H7N9 was changing in ways that made it more likely to develop into a pandemic strain. In its latest update on the flu strain, the Geneva-based World Health Organization said it continues to closely monitor the H7N9 situation and could conduct risk assessments. But they said so far the overall risk associated with the H7N9 virus has not changed. And as most everybody knows, I broadcast from the beautiful state of Oregon. Please don't come here. And I want to tell you about a story that's out of Oregon and being reported by RT. Approaching 900 days in jail, Bonito Vázquez Hernandez may be the longest held material witness in U.S. history, despite committing no crime. He's being held on $500,000 bail while waiting for a murder trial against his son to begin. Hernandez, 59, and his son were arrested nearly 2.5 years ago in California's Central Valley following the murder of Maria Rivera, a widowed mother of 6. Investigators believe one of Vázquez Hernandez's sons were responsible for the death. Now, according to the Oregonian newspaper, the arrests were made on grounds that they were hindering prosecution charges. Hernandez told investigators he had seen blood in a van driven by his other son. He admitted to stabbing the woman to death, adding that their father had also seen Eloy hiking with a knife shortly after the arrest. Eloy called investigators, pleading to let his family go. A day later, Eloy told police in San Diego he had stabbed Rivera while they were on a date, allegedly after she had insulted him, but he would not admit to the location of her body. Prosecutors have maintained that the testimony of Hernandez is critical to the case and that he has not cooperated with opportunities in his parental decision that would allow him to go free. They said they're afraid that if he's released before trial, he would not return to testify. Now, there's U.S. states have various laws regarding how long a material witness can be incarcerated. Some laws mandate the witness can be held for a maximum of 7 days, such as Arizona, while New Jersey law says they can't be held in jail at all. Oregon's statute is one that's open-ended. Now, though witnesses are typically held for days rather than months, they said we only ask for it in extraordinary situations, according to Senior Deputy District Attorney Jeff Liskowski, the Washington County prosecutor holding Vázquez. The Oregonian reported that legal scholars say that the length of his incarceration is likely unprecedented for a material witness not accused of a crime. And I found this story out of Oklahoma because I thought it was rather interesting about how they're combating different types of marriage. On Tuesday, the Oklahoma State House approved legislation that transfers the issuance of marriage license from the state to the clergy. News9.com reported that the measure, introduced by State Rep Todd Russ, would replace a state-issued marriage license with a clergy-issued marriage certificate. If enacted, the legislation would remove government from the practice of licensing marriage, a move that the measure's opponents say is in response to a federal judge's decision to overturn Oklahoma's prohibition on same-sex marriage. Russ said the bill neither allows nor disallows same-sex marriage under the bill. State Rep Emily Virgin, a Democrat, opposed the measure, saying it was necessary for the state government to be involved in the process of marriage. The bill was approved in the State House by a vote of 67 to 24, now moves on to the State Senate. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate all of you so very much. You can email me at contact@wdeanshook.com. You can join me on Facebook. That's WDeanShook. Twitter is WDeanShook. The email is contact@wdeanshook.com. Keep sending me those emails. I appreciate all of them so very much. And as usual, when the dust settles and the smoke clears, I'll be back with more truth in the news. Thank you.
You can get these full stories and more at WDeanshook.com. That's WDeanshook.com.